Let's take a trip back in time to 18th century France, right into the heart of the Enlightenment. But our guide on this journey isn't some famous philosopher you've read about in a textbook. Nope. He's a visitor from Siam, a man named Bak Ken. And seeing this revolutionary era through his eyes, well, it's going to show us everything in a whole new light.
So our story kicks off at a breakfast table, of all places, over something as simple as fermented anchovy spread. For our guide, Bak Ken, the taste immediately reminds him of plat ra, a similar fermented fish paste from his home. And this tiny little moment of cultural connection, or disconnection really, that's our way in. It's a reminder that we're seeing this world through the eyes of an outsider, someone who's constantly comparing and questioning everything he sees.
And believe it or not, that simple observation about breakfast, it quickly opens up a much bigger conversation about culture, what we believe, and superstition. As they're eating, the conversation moves on from food to, well, to the heavy stuff. The things really weighing on France at the time. There's talk of war, of the royal treasury being completely broke, and most importantly, the incredible power the church holds over everybody. This was an era governed just as much by fear and superstition as it was by any king or law. In this moment, right here, it just perfectly crystallizes the whole cultural exchange. His French hosts start talking about their fear of black cats, that they're witches in disguise, and Bak Ken chimes in with a similar belief from Siam. This little comparison shows how we all try to explain the unexplainable, but it also casts Bak Ken in this really interesting role. He's like a mirror, reflecting French society right back at itself.
And right into this world of folklore and fear steps the voice of reason. Their host, the philosopher Montesquieu, just cuts right through all the talk of superstition with the core message of the entire Enlightenment. He basically says, stop, abandon blind faith. He argues that the only way forward is through logic, through scientific thinking, and a real willingness to question absolutely everything.
And this is what makes Bak Ken's perspective so powerful. When he hears Montesquieu say this, he doesn't just nod along. He immediately thinks about his own home in Siam. He realizes his own people are also steeped in beliefs about spirits and lucky charms and all sorts of supernatural things. He sees in that moment that this age of enlightenment isn't some universal constant. It's a profound society-altering shift that his own culture hasn't gone through yet.
So as they leave breakfast, this whole intellectual debate is suddenly contrasted with this incredibly powerful, silent image. They pass a peasant couple, clearly exhausted from digging potatoes just to survive, who stop everything they're doing when the church bells ring, just to pray. That one image, it grounds the entire conversation. It's a stark reminder that for most people, faith wasn't some philosophical problem to be debated. It was the absolute foundation of their incredibly difficult lives.
Later on, at Montesquieu's grand home, his chateau, another intellectual giant arrives, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and with his arrival, the conversation pivots from superstition to the very fabric of society and government itself.
Rousseau, wow, he does not waste any time. He immediately cuts right to the heart of the injustice that's plaguing France. With these words, he gives voice to that simmering rage of the common people, the Third Estate, who are just getting crushed by taxes, while the two most powerful groups, the nobility and the clergy, pay absolutely nothing. This right here, this is the conflict that's eventually going to light the fuse of the French Revolution.
So Bak Ken, trying to get a handle on all of this, asks a really direct question about how government actually works. And in response, Montesquieu lays out his theory. He argues that pretty much all governments can be boiled down to one of three types, and each type is driven by a totally different guiding principle. It's his attempt to find a rational, logical system in the chaos of human politics.
So here's the breakdown. A republic, he says, runs on virtue. That means citizens have a sense of duty to the nation. A monarchy runs on honor. People do the right thing because they desire status and respect. And then there's despotism, which just runs on pure, simple fear. For Montesquieu, if you can figure out that core principle, you can understand how any government works, or, more importantly, why it's failing.
And this is where you really see Montesquieu the teacher come out. He realizes this is all getting a bit abstract, so he comes up with this brilliant, simple analogy for Bak Ken. A republic, he says, is like a co-op store. It only works if everyone acts responsibly, if they pay for what they take. And that payment, that sense of shared duty, that's virtue. If the virtue disappears, the whole system just collapses.
But Rousseau isn't satisfied with just analyzing the old systems. He's here to propose something completely radical. He challenges Montesquieu by asking a much deeper question: where does legitimate power truly come from?
So Rousseau introduces one of the most powerful ideas in political history, the social contract. And it is a revolutionary concept. The idea is that a just society isn't handed down from a king or from God. No, it's an agreement that the people make among themselves. They willingly trade some of their wild, natural freedom in exchange for the security and benefits of living together under laws that they all agree on.
Okay, so if the people make the rules, how do they decide what the rules should be? This is where Rousseau's next huge idea comes in, the general will. Now, this isn't just about what the majority wants in a vote. It's about the collective good, what is truly best for the community as a whole. For Rousseau, the general will is the ultimate authority. It's the only legitimate source for any law, and the government is just its servant.
And when you put all this together, this philosophy is just explosive. At its heart, it says, humans are born free. All political power comes from the people, and their collective will is the law. The government's job is just to enforce that law. This means every single citizen is wearing two hats. They're a lawmaker as part of the people, and they're a subject who has to obey the laws they helped create. I mean, this is basically the blueprint for modern democracy.
This leads them to their final and maybe most timeless debate. After arguing about how society should be built, they clash over an even bigger question. Is all this progress, science, art, commerce, is it actually good for us?
So you've got these two opposing camps laid out side by side. On one hand, you've got Montesquieu, the optimist. He sees things like trade and science as forces that are liberating humanity, pulling us out of poverty and ignorance. And on the other side, you've got Rousseau, the major skeptic. He argues that this same progress is actually a poison that corrupts our natural goodness, creating luxury for a few and misery for everyone else. Let's dig into Montesquieu's side of it. He argues that as we develop better farming, create currency, and trade with the whole world, we get wealthier, smarter, and we build a more refined society. He's basically saying, look around. We have magnificent art. We have incredible knowledge. To him, this is the undeniable engine of human improvement.
But Rousseau fires back with this absolutely blistering critique. He sees all this luxury as a trap that just makes people weak and greedy. He argues that a society focused on arts and sciences will always create massive inequality. The state itself, he claims, just becomes a weapon for the rich to protect what they have. And in the end, this so-called progress creates a world where you have both extravagant feasts and people starving in the streets.
And just as the philosophical tension hits its absolute peak, our guide, Bak Ken, brings everyone crashing right back down to earth. He's completely overwhelmed by all these dense arguments, and he just makes a simple, very human request. It's a funny, perfectly timed reminder that these aren't just abstract ideas floating in the air. This is a dizzying, intense conversation happening between real people.
And that's where our journey ends. Not with a neat little answer, but with the exact same essential question that Montesquieu and Rousseau were wrestling with. It's a question we are absolutely still debating today. As our own societies progress with new tech and new wealth, are we actually building a better world for everyone, or are we just creating more sophisticated ways to separate the fortunate from the forgotten? It's definitely a question worth thinking about.